This is The Herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening, live in Los Angeles. iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, all over Twitter, Facebook, and our YouTube channel. Today, there is no television, and you know how much I love these days. We have a tremendous show planned today. Rick Barry, an all-timer, Earl Watson, Doug Gottlieb all stopping by. And we'll go to Cleveland, where somebody who covers the Cavs every day will give us an update as the playoffs in the NBA start tomorrow. We got a lot of things to start with, but I was thinking about this. Steve Kerr, coach of the Warriors, was on a radio station up in the Bay Area, a very popular radio station, a very popular show, and he was saying on Steph Curry, his truly most valuable player, dude is not close to playing.
I mean, he's not practicing yet or anything, and I think 3 weeks is Saturday. That's when we said the doctors would reevaluate him. He's not anywhere close to playing, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Wow. Golden State with no Steph Curry. Now, you think to yourself, Golden State's got 4 All-Stars. Only one Steph Curry is missing. All good. That's not really what's happening. Golden State in the last 20 games where Steph has played and Kevin Durant hasn't, they're 20-0. In the last 20 games in which KD has played and Steph hasn't, 11-9. But here's what's interesting when Kevin Durant came to the Warriors. And I'll tell you how it reminds me of presidential elections. When Kevin Durant came to Golden State to win more, he did. But the move to Golden State has unveiled the truth about Kevin Durant. He's not an alpha. He's not really a leader. He doesn't want to change the world, telling Bill Simmons recently, I just want to hoop and play video games. And he's not as valuable as we think. And man, when it comes to the media, boy, does he have rabbit ears. Kevin Durant in Oklahoma City was talented and liked, and LeBron's guy, sort of a mystery. Small market. They had Westbrook, who was flashier and more talked about. In Golden State spotlight, though, we've learned the weaknesses, which we didn't know about. This is why it reminds me of presidential elections. When a man runs for president, any of them, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, Republican, we already know they're successful. He's a governor. She's a senator. He's a real estate mogul. But once you take and run for a high-profile job like president, we learn of your weaknesses. Oh, she's unethical. He's a creep. He's a liar. So is she. The magnifying glass on higher profile jobs overwhelmingly sheds negative light, not positive. When people run for president, we know they're capable. We know they're smart. They often go to big schools, Cornell and Brown and Penn and Wharton. What we don't know is that shady real estate deal in the 70s where she did that or he did that. When Kevin Durant was in Oklahoma City, we knew all the good stuff. When Jeb Bush was just in Florida, he was a Bush. Then he ran for president. Oh my God, he's the world's most boring man. Kevin Durant was overwhelmingly liked and appealing. But this move to Golden State, a higher profile job, now with Steph out, has really unveiled the truth. He wants to hoop and play video games. He's not an alpha. Doesn't really have the leadership qualities we're looking for that Steph has. He's not only not more valuable than LeBron or better than LeBron, he's not even the most valuable player on his own team. The higher profile the job, the more intense the scrutiny, the more we see your weaknesses. At this point, Durant's just super talented, and that's it. I mean, that's really it. So, let me shift to this. I was driving around yesterday, as I'm prone to do, cars and stuff, transportation, freeways. I do it on almost every day. And I turned on radio, as I often do, And I was listening to a former NFL player. This NFL player went to an Ivy League school. He's got kind of a remarkable story. His name is Marcellus Wiley. He's very talented. He was a good football player. He's a very good broadcaster, radio and TV. And it was interesting to note, because I listen to all sorts of radio. I listen to a lot of AM radio, talk radio. And Marcellus did something that was unique. It was the first time that I can remember hearing a player or former player talk about the Colin Kaepernick situation from a business perspective. Did you hear the story yesterday where Colin Kaepernick wouldn't say if he would stop kneeling? So the Seahawks, who a year ago were very much into politics, said no thanks and postponed a workout. And Marcellus's opinion was, man, when you go to work, when have any of us ever been able to do and say and protest exactly what we want? And I thought, oh, that's how I've seen this from day one. The racial perspective gets all the discussion. It gets the headlines. But to me, this has been commerce in motion. As I've said before, if Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson kneeled, they'd still be employed. Not all employees are treated the same. Talent, pay, experience has always made different rules for different people. Let me talk more about the Kaepernick situation in Seattle through the eyes that I've always intended this to be seen from, at least from my prism, business. Yesterday, I'm reading a story about Bob Iger. Bob Iger is one of the smartest business people in the world. He runs Disney. He was talking in a magazine about how the world is shifting and how you have to pivot and change so quickly now, and you didn't used to have to. Let me quote Bob Iger here. Quote, "The status quo to me is a joke. When I was growing up, you could protect the status quo and do reasonably well for decades. General Motors, for instance, TWA, and Pan Am, Holiday Inn, Xerox. You look at these brands and the business models lasted most of our lifetime. But now the speed of change is so much faster than we've ever imagined it would be. And what's happening is that we're seeing mass disruption in our lives. Whether it's politics, Donald Trump was a disruptor. Warfare with ISIS. You look at Uber and Netflix, Airbnb. And you should quickly conclude that disruption has never been more apparent or more profound. If you want to thrive in a disrupted world, you have to be incredibly adept at not standing still. I found it interesting through the Kaepernick situation that overwhelmingly newspapers and print people are pro-Kaepernick and are also dead and dying businesses, not able to pivot. Sports Illustrated, magazines, pro-Kaepernick. Another business that's dead, S.A.S, could never pivot, still could never, ever, ever, due to arrogance and maybe incompetence, figure out the internet. In business, as Bob Iger says, you've got to pivot quickly. Businesses not only have a right to do that, it is not only a priority to do that, it is in your very DNA and survival. So the NFL saw ratings deterioration last year. More angry fans, more angry headlines. And the NFL, which is the best run business, number one TV show on 5 Network, said, we may need to pivot a little bit on this. We may need to pivot. And the NFL has a right to, if it's hurting business. Colin, there is no proof. Oh, yes, there is. At Fox, we own 40% of NFL games, the highest percentage now of any network counting our Thursday games. We have research. They're called A, B, and C, D markets in television. The C and D markets are more rural markets. You ever driven around rural America? You ever notice the flag is everywhere? In C and D markets, there has been an erosion in rural America of NFL football. It's called research. We have it. So does the NFL. The businesses telling the NFL, lecturing the NFL on how to handle Kaepernick are often dying businesses due to their inability to pivot. The NFL in my lifetime has been the best run business because of its very ability to change rules and policies. Kaepernick never offended me, but I don't think I speak for everybody. My family doesn't have a deep military background, and I know what you're saying. Colin, this was never about the military. No, it wasn't. Or at least it wasn't intended to be. Certainly Colin Kaepernick didn't intend it to be anti-military. But sometimes my wife asks me questions and I give her answers. And they don't land like I wanted it to either. I appreciated a former player, somebody I know, seeing the Kaepernick situation along business lines. And after reading that article on Bob Iger, I could only conclude Michael Bennett was very political. He is now on the Super Bowl champs. Aaron Rodgers has had political statements. Russell Wilson could have kneeled too. They'd all still be highly employed. If you take a deep breath, take your politics out of it, this is commerce to a large degree in motion. Great to have you in today. Really is. Rick Barry, Earl Watson, Doug Gottlieb. Yesterday, I got a little bit of pushback. Not much, but a little. On, the stat padding for Westbrook. He even brought sort of my term stat padding up. So clearly he had heard us or at least heard what we said from others. I'm going to tell you why what Westbrook is doing reminds me a little of what Barry Bonds did and why there is a burden for American superstar athletes to be clean and to never goose stats. That's coming up. Is your company outgrown QuickBooks and shared spreadsheets costing you time and money? Now's the time to move your biz to the cloud. Introducing NetSuite by Oracle, the business management software that handles every aspect of your business in an easy-to-use cloud platform. With NetSuite, you save time and money and headaches by managing sales, finance, accounting, orders, and HR instantly from your desk or even your phone. Thousands of the best-known brands and fastest-growing companies use NetSuite to manage their business, and now it's available to you, and it's more affordable than you think. Right now, NetSuite's offering you valuable insights to overcome the obstacles that are holding you back, and they're doing it for free. Don't miss out on unleashing your business's full potential with this free guide called Crushing the 5 Barriers to Growth. You'll learn how to acquire new customers, increase profits, get real visibility into your cash flow. Download the guide at NetSuite, NetSuite, netsuite.com/herd. Get your free Crushing the 5 Barriers to Growth guide today at netsuite.com/herd, netsuite.com/herd. We have massive news in less than 5 minutes with veteran newsman John Goulet. This is why he is a veteran French newsman, John Goulet, because of this kind of extensive reporting. He basically found it on Twitter. So he'll be joining us in less than 5 minutes with a massive story. God, I love this business. We are nearly breaking stories ourselves. We are so close to almost doing the work ourselves. I am so profoundly happy about this story, too, and it shows why one owner is smarter than everybody else in the room. So let me just address something. Yesterday, I said it bothers me that Russell Westbrook is stat padding. I've always had a belief, let me clarify myself here, that there is a greater burden of responsibility on the man running the company than the kid in the mailroom. Right? The GM of the car dealership has got a burden of responsibility. The guy or gal waxing the car out back does. More viewed, more discussed, more powerful, higher compensation. So Westbrook's a superstar. He's one of the 20, 30 superstars in America, and he's doing some stat padding. Carmelo admits it. We've got video proof, mostly on his rebounds. Ask yourself this. Why did Barry Bonds bother us? It wasn't like Barry Bonds, when he was taking HGH cream or whatever it was called, was winning the World Series. He wasn't. Sammy Sosa didn't win it either. Mark McGwire wasn't winning it either. But it really deeply bothered us with Barry Bonds because he was going to take the records of a very decent man who dealt with things in the 60s and 70s no human should, Hank Aaron out of the record books. Hank Aaron has never sought attention. He starred in a time in America where it was difficult to be Hank Aaron. Barry Bonds' HGH use made Hank Aaron less relevant historically. That's why there is a burden on superstars, because you'll shatter and break all-time records. Westbrook would average 25 and 10 points and assists without goosing, but he'd give about 6 rebounds a game. The goosing gets him a triple-double. And who does that make less relevant? A very decent man, Oscar Robertson, who has never sought attention. But he is now, today, less relevant. We erect statues and write books about legends. It would be one thing if a C-minus NBA player on a given night got a triple-double and his teammates got out of the way for a couple of rebounds so he could accomplish something he'd never done before. That wouldn't change the books. They're not building statues for guys like that. But Westbrook and Bonds, when you goose or pad numbers, are changing books. That's what bothers me. Stat padding, HGH, goosing numbers. There is a burden when you're as gifted as Magic and Duncan and Bird to do it right. If Lance Armstrong, while using, was finishing 183rd in the tour, who gives a rip? But he makes Greg LeMond less relevant. To me, and maybe only me, that stuff matters. Here's veteran newsman John Goulet.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herdline News.
Colin, we have almost breaking news. According to Adam Schefter, the Cowboys are expected to release wide receiver Dez Bryant.
There we go. Excellent.
I wouldn't even say, his tweet says today, I would say momentarily. He is currently meeting with Jerry Jones, like at this minute. And he said, barring an unexpected last-minute change of heart, the plan was going into the meeting to cut Dez Bryant.
Now, we have been the leaders of the Dump Dez, Say No to Proposition 88 movement. He's a $16.5 million cap hit. He's needy, expensive, can no longer catch reliably, and has always been marginally committed, saying this offseason, I'm going to start working with a wide receiver coach now. Hey, boy. So to me, this is a really smart move, but there's a second tier to it that's kind of fascinating that John, I'm going to give John the credit here. John mentioned this during the break, and I'd never thought about this, but we know this, that NFL owners rely heavily on 2 of their owners to run the show. Bob Kraft in New England and Jerry Jones. Yep. Kind of front and center will walk into these NFL owner meetings and shift narratives. So you made a great point about them doing it today.
Well, Jerry has certainly found a way to maximize the press of this event. He doesn't cut Dez when everyone else is getting cut and released or signed or whatever. Then they announce on Wednesday that they're going to meet with Dez 2 days later, which was kind of odd. And then on top of it, they've been there's been almost a Dez tracker all day today. Like, oh, he's not at the facility yet. He's leaving now, though.
So Jerry,
now he's in the facility.
Classic Jerry.
They have turned cutting an old, overpaid wide receiver, which every team does. They have turned that into a week-long event.
This is why, I was yesterday. Somebody sent me an article on the 10 most valuable sports franchises in the world. Real Madrid was like 3, and the Lakers were 10, and the Yankees were like 5. And the Dallas Cowboys globally were number 1. Jerry Jones' loyalty. I'm not saying he doesn't want to win, but he has masterfully orchestrated Tony Romo to CBS. Who do you think called CBS and pumped up Tony Romo? Jerry Jones gets on the phone with Les Moonves. Why do you think we have Aikman? CBS has Tony. The NFL Network's got Michael Irving. Why do you think this is? NBC. Does NBC have a cowboy?
They don't.
Well, that will change.
That will. Well, now the draft. Now that we have the draft, Troy Aikman's going to be a part of that now.
So I mean, listen, Jerry, and I'm not saying these people aren't worthy of their jobs. Moose Johnson, they're all great. We put them on the show, but Jerry orchestrates media more brilliantly than any owner of my life. He's really, really a very, very beyond lucid, a very, very smart, nimble businessman.
Speaking of the powerful owners in the NFL, according to our guy Albert Breer of the MMQB, multiple sources are saying that Robert Kraft was the driving force in preventing offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels from taking the Colts head coaching job.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday.
Now, we're pretty sure Kraft was also, maybe at the request of Brady, responsible for telling Bill, Jimmy's got to go because Brady's our quarterback moving forward. Do you think this is in part Kraft realizing, okay, we kind of messed up the future by trading Jimmy.
Yeah.
We got to at least keep one piece here for the post-Brady and Bill era?
You know what I think Robert Kraft is saying? In 5 years, I'm not sure Brady or Belichick are going to be here, but I'm going to be here. So I'm going to take control of my business, and that's what owners do.
Perfect head coach in waiting, really, to have, right?
Yep.
And finally, Cavs point guard George Hill has actually had to play against LeBron in the playoffs many times when he was with the Pacers. And this year, he always came out on the losing end of those series, by the way. This year, he's actually very excited to be on the same side as LeBron.
At the end of the year, it sucked. You know, you go home and you're so close. The good thing is we got the best player in the world playing for us. So I'm very excited about that. I don't got to get put out by him this year, which I did a lot in my career. So I'm happy to be on the other side.
We kind of saw this. Remember the Raptors comment last year, how they said if we had just had LeBron, we would have been fine. Isn't that the level of respect he gets from all these Eastern Conference teams?
Absolutely. And players say, especially the international players, they have no stigma. They'll just say, I don't want to face LeBron. John Goulet of the News.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
Not to show my age, but some of the first basketball I remember watching was in 1975. And there was a basketball team in the Bay Area that had Rick Barry and Butch Beard and Derek Dickey and Jeff Mullen and Jamal Wilkes. And Al Attles and his Warriors, Rick Barry was the star, swept Casey Jones and the Washington Bullets, I believe they were called, 4-0. It was the first great basketball team I'd ever seen. Rick Barry is now joining us in the Herd on the Couch. The first great basketball team as a kid I ever watched, and Rick was the star. His many sons have been broadcasters. I know I'm taking you down memory lane, but I remember sitting in my house in a black and white TV. You were the best player, Jeff Mullen second, Jamal Wilkes, Clifford Ray was your center, Butch Beard, Derek Dickey, and I Have No Life. I remember all of it on a black and white TV.
It's probably very sad commentary, actually. Yeah. But we had actually George Johnson. We had a two-headed center. Yeah, with Clifford Ray and George Johnson.
Yeah.
And, George was instrumental in us winning the seventh game against Chicago in the finals of the West.
You remember what was also significant about that series, Al Attles and Casey Jones.
Yep, two first black head coaches.
Yep, I remember that as a kid.
Nobody talked about it or even cared about it.
But it was, Hall of Famer Rick Barry, 8-time NBA champ. I've always said you were the Bird, Larry Bird before Larry Bird. In my lifetime, you were the forward who shot like a guy, a guard. And I've always considered you one of the great players of all time. This is interesting. There are players who are valuable. Rick, you were a leader. You were an emotional leader. You were a physical leader. You were a points leader. Okay, you were a vocal, verbal player. There are players that are great that aren't leaders.
Oh, that's true. There's no question.
Steph is 20-0 in the last 20 without KD. KD without Steph is 11-9. Can we make the comment that KD is a remarkable talent, but he's not really an alpha? And not necessarily a leader.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And actually, I think he's become a better player going to the Warriors. In fact, in his career, when he first came out, I actually remember sitting with Jerry West watching him when he was at Texas. And we both said, wow, this kid's going to be a heck of an NBA basketball player. But when he came in, he wasn't a facilitator. He wasn't someone that was helping to make his teammates better. He's a great talent. But he's become much better at that. And I think playing with the Warriors has helped him become even better at it. But there's a big difference between learning how to do that and being the guy that leads your team and gets everybody together and does the kind of things that Steph is capable of doing. Taking nothing away from KD, I think he's one of the truly remarkable players. I mean, I have a picture that I carry around and show people when he was the MVP of the series, which I was happy for him. Because everybody criticized him for making the move, and I respected the fact that he wanted to be a champion. And not only was he a champion, he got to be MVP of the series. And I'm standing next to him. He dwarfs me. I mean, he's a 7-footer. It's crazy that he does the things that he does at his size. People don't have a true understanding and appreciation for that.
2 years ago, I'm at a Laker game on the sidelines, and it was the first time I'd been within a foot of him. And I looked at his feet, and I told my friend, I said, he's a center. He shoots like a 2-guard.
Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, the thing about the Warriors is that the Warriors have 3 indefensible players. They have 3 guys who can all kill you from the 3. They all can go to the basket, and they're all great free throw shooters. There is not a chance in the world that you can defend that when you play against them. You have to pray that 2 of their guys are having off games to have a chance. And the great example of that is last year in the playoffs. Clay was struggling in the first 2 series. The other 2 guys were playing great. They swept without Clay.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's such a difficult thing to beat them. But the problem now is they're not healthy. I'm really concerned about them. They're going to have a difficult time in the playoffs, trying to continue to advance, to win. Even if Steph were to come back, what are the chances of him being at the level he needs to be in order to help him?
You know, Rick Barry, Hall of Famer, joining us. Rick is the coach of the Ball Hogs and the Big 3. He was here for the Big 3 draft last night and had one of the very funny moments, actually, putting on the shades last night. It was very funny. Let me go to this. Nobody wants to be called injury prone. Injuries now are part of sports. Athletes are like violins now. They're so finely tuned. It feels like I'm getting more injuries than less. Kyrie Irving and Steph Curry. I think part of the narrative, to be honest, is they're a little injury prone. Rick, dynasties all end quicker, including yours in Golden State. It can be a trade, an injury, vanity, ego. Shaq and Kobe could have lasted forever. It didn't. The Big 3 in Boston. Rondo started not getting along. I've said with the Warriors, it's not going to last 6 years. There's going to be an injury and there's going to be an ego somewhere. I look at Steph and I say to myself, Rick, that's it.
Yeah, Bill, he's always had the situation with the injuries, especially with the ankles, and it's sad, but you're absolutely right. It's very difficult to maintain. That's why when you look at some of the dynasties, for them to be able to maintain that, for the Boston Celtics or what they did, the Lakers over the years that they did it, San Antonio's been incredibly consistent for a long, long time. But even it's not like you totally dominate and you're winning 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row. What the Celtics did was just totally remarkable. But it's luck. It's so much luck. And again, in our case, I tell you right now, we didn't win the championship the next year in '76 because they made a trade. They traded Butch Beard, who was, I think, nobody probably knows the name Butch Beard.
He was
Butch
number
Beard, 9,
wasn't he?
Yeah, Butch Beard was our point guard, okay? And Butch Beard was the guy that made sure things got done the right way. And the sad part about it is, and I know this is a fact, they traded him away because the general manager couldn't stand dealing with his wife. True. Absolutely. They get him away, and they said, we're going to have some other player. We were not the same team. Even though we won more games, losing Butch Beard, to me, was the reason why we didn't win. We won because of Clifford Ray coming to our team. Clifford Ray was the guy that pulled everybody together.
6'8" center, tough guy.
Yeah, 6'9", and he was like 2% body fat or something, but we're dear friends. We fish all the time together, and he was the guy. Love him like a brother. But so that little thing, that one trade, if it wasn't for Butch Beard, there's no way that we don't win the championship the next year, because we wound up giving away the series to Phoenix. Yep. To their credit, they took advantage of it. They got hosed up in Boston on the triple overtime, which I was broadcasting. Yes. I chose to ignore his request, Richie Powers, the official. How does an official ignore the request of a timeout from a player right in his face? I mean, he should have been fired. He should have been fired. And I was with Mindy Rudolph in the booth doing it, the game. And he thought he did the right thing. I said, you got to be kidding me. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that goes on that has to be nipped in the bud. Yeah. I heard something else that you talked about earlier, and I'm with you on this. There's no way that you can compare what Russell Westbrook did, and what he did was remarkable. I don't care. You're a guard, and you get triple-double for a season. That's remarkable. But the difference is that Oscar Robertson just played. Westbrook was trying to get triple-doubles.
No question.
Okay, and that's the difference between the two. And the other one, and this is the factor that nobody's ever talked about, and this is a dramatic factor. The last time I looked when he got his triple-doubles, he didn't play 9 games against Wilt Chamberlain, against Bill Russell, against Nate Thurman, against Walt Bellamy. This guy's going to the basket dunking. That never would have happened if he played against those guys.
But you got to remember this, too, is that the possessions are up. I tell people, Rick, it's like football. Joe Montana never threw for 4,000 yards. Blake Bortles did last year. So that's no longer impressive. Markelle Fultz came off the bench 2 nights ago, played 25 minutes and got a triple-double. I'm over it. The possessions, the pace of play.
Well,
Rick.
we played a lot of pace. We scored 120 points back in my day. It was up and down.
You were on a great shooting team. You guys were rare. Mullen could shoot. Wilkes could shoot. You were the best arguable
But
shooter.
I'm talking about when I first came in the league before I played with those. In 1965, when I came in the league, we scored 120 points regularly. I mean, it was like people seem to forget that it was a high play pace game, fast pace game, up and down, scoring a lot of points. That's what it was. And it was a whole different philosophy, though. It was funnel everything to your big guys and make Nathan and block the shots. Now you never want anybody to get to the basket. You don't want your big men leading the league in shot blocking. That means your defense sucks.
Right. Rick Barry's joining us, Hall of Famer. You know, I was talking. You know, we have made. David Stern was a very tough negotiator. I know people that negotiated with him. He was a yeller, a screamer. He'd call you. He'd intimidate you. Even if you tanked, you called it something. It was the process. He would call sports editors locally and argue about stories. I know two people at ESPN that negotiated with him. He was intimidating. Oh, yeah. If you tanked, you better have an argument that you're not tanking. So Adam Silver, more pro player, more reticent, a little more meek, becomes commissioner. We have 8 teams tanking because nobody's afraid of Adam Silver. We have a major issue in this league. I have to Google players now. I don't know who they are. Doesn't this bother you? Isn't this an integrity issue?
Yeah, I have a real problem with that because, first of all, I don't think the teams are intentionally tanking. I would have no respect at all for any player that would go out there and not give his best effort every time. I mean, you're going to tell me to go out there and not play hard. We don't really want to win. I don't think they're saying that to anybody. And so if that's the case, then you got to throw a lot of that on the players.
Well, no. Here's what I don't. Players are, what's happening is minor injuries, please sit. We don't want to risk it.
Right.
You have rosters like Memphis. I can't name 9 players. G League calls up. Extensive. When players get marginally hurt, you would have played through it.
And I don't have a problem with that, trying to develop some guys, evaluate them, and do some things like that if you know you're out of the playoff. I don't have a problem. What they have to do is change the draft, okay? What it should be is that the team that has the best chance of getting the top draft pick should be the team that just misses out on the playoffs.
Agreed. I totally agree with that. Denver Nuggets should have the number 1 pick.
They should have the number. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Give an incentive to try to be as good as you can be in order to enhance your chances to do things.
Because, by the way, we do have absolute proof, Rick. The Celtics didn't have to be awful to rebuild. You don't have to do Phoenix. You don't. Boston has always been reasonable. They hired the right coach. They bring over some veteran players. They've been in a total rebuild for 5 years. They're still viable.
All right, I'll give you my evaluation of this. In pro sports, the team sports, the 3 major sports, the most critical elements to have success. Who do you draft? Who do you get in trades? Who do you get in free agency? It's all about your choice of players. Then you hope that you get a coach that doesn't screw things up.
Right.
But you have to get the right talent. Most teams don't evaluate talent very well. I always said this, and I know that I tick off a lot of people, and I never mention any names, but there are some guys out there who are looking at talent who wouldn't know talent if it walked up and bit him in the butt.
I agree with you.
And that's the biggest problem. You have to find the right talent. And so that should be their biggest emphasis, is having someone who can go out there and recognize a kid that has the ability. I can watch a kid in 5 minutes and tell you whether or not I want to see anything else more about him, because the one thing you have to look for, does he have a natural feel for the game? You cannot teach that. I can teach you other things. You can teach somebody to become a better shooter. You can teach somebody to learn some of the other things that they should be taught when they're youngsters. That's one of the other problems, because I'm starting up the Rick Barry Basketball School in conjunction with a guy named Jim Oleos, as award-winning coach with a program for kids, girls and boys 5 to 9, fundamentals. Award-winning program on character development, on fundamental development, on schoolwork, trying to give them a chance in life. But what it's going to help is those kids that are in there that have natural ability and talent athletically are going to have a chance to have a foundation to build on, so that when they move up to the junior NBA and some of those other programs, they now can get more advanced things, but they're going to have a chance to fully develop their abilities and their talents. Right now, there are guys playing in the NBA who will never be as good as they should be, because they don't have that fundamental background and that foundation to build on.
Totally agree.
This is what has to be done, and change the face of basketball and start creating better players who know what to do with the amazing ability they have. I'm not a big fan of AAU basketball. I think that I think a lot of these guys with a lot of injuries, I think they're breaking them down. My son, I try to keep him out of it. My son Canyon, who's had a nice big 31-point game overseas, they got to get him back here because he can play. Anyway, I kept them away from it as much as possible because you go to a weekend AAU, you play on a Friday night, you'll play a game, sometimes maybe even 2 games. They're going to play 3 or 4 games on Saturday, a couple of games on Sunday.
You break down.
That's exactly right. These young kids, you're breaking these kids down.
By the way, this has been what happened in society. Rick Barry's joining us. It used to be a kid, I quarterbacked, I played basketball and baseball. Now you have to play one. Well, a 9 to 15-year-old kid's body is not ready for repetitive motion. So a kid has to now only play baseball. How many pitches can a 13-year-old boy throw? It used to be you had baseball, then you went to play basketball.
Oh, that's
then
right.
You went playing football, then you went skateboarding with your buddies in the summer. Your body was able to grow. Yeah. Okay, he's Rick Barry. He's an 8-time All-Star. He's an NBA champion. He's a Hall of Famer. He is the coach of the Ball Hogs in Big 3. Big 3 starts June 22nd on FS1. It was an absolute pleasure.
It's a pleasure always to talk to you, but did you forget my ABA All-Star stuff?
Well, yeah, but you're that's like, I don't talk about Warren Moon's Canadian.
Hey, it doesn't matter. The ABA was a heck of a league. If it wasn't
was a great
for the ABA,
league.
They brought a lot of players into it, and you had to play well to get chosen to that. So let's not diss the ABA.
Okay.
I just was at the 50th reunion, which was really awesome.
Artis Gilmore, Dan Issel, Dr. J, Rick Barry, and who am I missing?
George Gervin.
Yeah,
there's a whole bunch of other guys that were really
great.
good.
It was great.
Really good.
Rick, good seeing you, man.
All righty.
In LA, it's The Herd. Wouldn't you love a bigger tax refund? For a maximum refund, slay it. TaxSlayer.com. By the way, Rick Barry told me, go to Rick24.com. Rick24.com. He's got a gift for you. It's free. It's a travel thing. Rick24.com. The Cowboys have released Dez Bryant after the receivers meeting with Jerry Jones, according to a source. The Cowboys will save $8 million against the cap this year with a move that is significant. Dez was reportedly saying, I'll see you guys twice this year when he left. Philadelphia could use a deep threat, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know. You know, the cruel thing about sports, this is the really cruel thing. It's actually kind of, now again, in the context of what's sad in life. I mean, obviously, you know, being a burn victim, abject poverty is, you know, incredibly sad. This is less sad, but because these are all millionaires. But one of the things that's kind of the cruel sadness of professional sports is a lot of these kids, they come into these sports with all sorts of talent, but they're just not mature enough to understand that they've only got about 6 to 7 years to really hit it. And by the time a lot of them grow up, their talent has eroded. Dez Bryant just wasn't mature enough to understand how big of a position and important he was. And now he's like, I want to get committed, get a receiver coach. Dude, you can no longer run. You can't separate. Like, it's over. It's. I say this with John Wall. John Wall's a remarkable talent, but by the time about a year ago, it really clicked with John. Well, he was 2 knee surgeries in, and now he's not the same player, and now he's hurt again. Is that a lot of guys come into these leagues? That's why I'm always really tough when I grade quarterbacks and point guards. Are you ready to run a franchise? Kyrie Irving now runs the franchise. Steph Curry runs the franchise, and you're asked to run it at 22 years old. Okay, so quarterbacks, I'm rough. You know, I have been rough on guys because I'm like I'm rough on Baker Mayfield. I was rough on Johnny Manziel. I'm like, you're not Jamarcus Russell. You're not mature enough at 22 to run my franchise. I was never a fan of Jamarcus Russell, Johnny Manziel, and Baker Mayfield. It's not just a talent thing, but if you got a police video, Baker Mayfield, I'm out. And it's kind of a sad thing because I say this knowing that at 22 years old, how many young men are mature enough to run a franchise? Not many. I wouldn't have been. And it's kind of a sad thing in sports is by the time you grow up in sports, like in my business, I could be immature at 22 and was, and I was immature at 25 and was, but it didn't affect it because my window to make money in this business is 50 years. I'm to be honest with you, my peak is probably now because I've got the experience, I've got the knowledge, I'm, you know, a little more chill, I prepare different. My peak years as a broadcaster are probably 46 to 60 or 58. That's probably my peak years. Maybe I can extend that a couple of years. You stay in shape, you know, you do your crossword puzzles, you keep the brain nimble. But in athletes, you know, 22 to 29, and then stuff starts to taper off. It's like in baseball. If you're still great at 33 in baseball, I'm suspicious. That's why all these baseball players think They think there's collusion in baseball. No, it's analytics. And now that HGH is out and even greenies are out, you can drink coffee and that's it. Players are naturally at 31, 32, Evan Longoria, they're tapering off. And the analytics, all these smart guys running baseball teams, it's not collusion, it's analytics. They're like, well, I'm not going to pay a 31-year-old in the roid era what I did because he's not extending his window from 22 to 30 to 22 to 37. And so that's everybody was talking about, oh, my God, there's collusion in baseball. No, there's analytics and a loss of greenies and amphetamines and HGH. You shouldn't pay a 32-year-old what you did 15 years ago. No HGH and analytics are proving players naturally taper off. So when you come into these pro sports, man, you got to be ready to go. You got to be a grown-up. And if you're not, you become Dez Bryant. It's a cautionary tale. He's finally figuring it out, getting a receiver coach, eating right, being more mature, and he can no longer separate. It's just, I've seen it a million times. So that's why when you sit down at the draft and you ask these questions to kids, you're trying to, in 8 minutes, is he a kid that's ready to go, not just physically, is he ready to go emotionally? Is he ready to put the gear on and be fully committed and go to bed early and get up early and put in 60 hours a week for his craft? Unfortunately, many aren't. Hour 2 coming up, we'll go live to Dallas. Live to Dallas, Dez Bryant, no longer a Cowboy. It's a Friday, it's The Herd. This is The Herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening. Live in Los Angeles, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio. No TV today. We're going to go in 5 minutes to Matt Mosley, Dallas Morning News columnist. Dez Bryant, no longer a Cowboy. We have been the leaders of Dump Dez, Proposition 88. Don't get it. Expensive, needy, and I don't think he's good in the locker room. Dallas has good young leaders like Dak Prescott, Tyron Smith, Sean Lee. Good young players I like who can be leaders. I like a lot about Dallas, but I don't like the idea of a veteran player who's needy and deteriorating getting into the way of that locker room because I think Dallas has a bright future. So the Cowboys, and I have some real basic questions that I got to ask Matt about, so stick around for that in a couple minutes. I want to start with this, though. We all know the media has biases and agendas. And not just the political media, obviously, but the sports media does. They pick and choose what they want to talk about. They're really big into the NBA reseeding. We gotta fix the playoffs. We gotta go 1 through 16, no conference. We have to have reseeding because no, we don't. You're just tired of LeBron dominating the East. That's all this is. There is no indication on any platform I broadcast from, and I have a podcast, I have digital, I have radio, I have television, I have a Facebook and YouTube page. In every single platform, when I talk LeBron, it is my highest performing segment. There is no LeBron fatigue. There is none. The data indicates he's in the finals. The records are great in the NBA. Take him out of the playoffs, nobody's watching ESPN's Eastern Conference playoffs. And I mean nobody. He and Ben Simmons now are carrying the East. There is no evidence of LeBron fatigue. But the seeding is all about LeBron fatigue. So let me give you an idea of how absurd and how irrelevant seeding really is. Here are the current matchups that start tomorrow in the NBA playoffs. These are the real ones. Raptors Wizards, Celtics Bucks, Sixers Heat, Cavs Pacers, Rockets T-Wolves, Warriors Spurs, Blazers Pelicans, Thunder Jazz. There's some good ones, some boring ones. Here is what reseeding would create. 1 through 16, no conferences. Rockets Bucks, Raptors Heat, Warriors Nuggets, Celtics T-Wolves, Cavs Pacers, Blazers Jazz, Thunder Pelicans. Oh, God, pinch me. Those are so much better. Oh, my God, I just got rushed to a television. The second group of games, some are good, some are okay, some are ugly. There is no need for reseeding. It's a LeBron fatigue because the NBA media, in their agenda, wants a new shiny toy to play with. They're bored with LeBron against the Warriors. Their big sales point, here's their big sales point on reseeding. This is the big one. It gives us the Rockets Warriors in the finals, pitting the two best teams in the league against each other. Why? Because LeBron Warriors ratings are bad? No, they're breaking records. By the way, the Rockets are better in the regular season than LeBron. Brah, you sure they're better in the postseason? Because I've seen Harden's career, Chris Paul's career, and Mike D'Antoni's career. And I've seen LeBron's career. You absolutely sure Houston's the same team in the playoffs that they are in the regular season? You exactly, precisely, absolutely, inarguably sure the Warriors without Steph are the same team you saw last year in the playoffs? Maybe they're not. Reseeding, gotta have it, outrageous. There is no need to overreact with reseeding. The playoff series that are coming up, I can't wait to watch Oklahoma City and the Jazz. That's going to be a great series. I want to see the Warriors and the Spurs. That's going to be a great series. Rockets T-Wolves? When's the last time a 1 versus 8 was that talented? It's going to be fun. There is no need for reseeding. It's bored people. There is no need for it. It's ridiculous. I can't wait for the Western Conference playoffs. I mean, even the Blazers Pelicans, because I think Portland's backcourt, they have an MVP candidate. Stotts is an underrated coach. They're a team that could win a couple series. Well, here you go. Dez Bryant, Cowboys just saved $8 million cap hit. Dez Bryant's no longer a Cowboy. Now, we've been saying for multiple weeks, we call it Proposition 88 Dump Dez. Needy, expensive, and I think he can be a distraction in a young, talented locker room where I think Dak Prescott for the next decade is going to carry it. The Dallas Morning News is one of the last great newspapers in America. One of the columnists is Matt Mosley, who's also the co-host of the Doomsday podcast with Ed Werder, who's a wonderful guy. And Matt is joining us. So I'm reading the story right now, Matt, and it says, Dez wasn't offered a pay cut. Am I from Matt to believe they just wanted him out of the locker room?
Well, I think, Colin, that's what it came down to. And I think this is, again, if you read Jerry's statement, he said this was with other people's input. I think Jerry loves this guy like a son, and he kind of had a similar relationship with other players over the years, Dion, a little bit with T.O., but I think he felt extremely close to Dez. But I think Steven was very hawkish in this, and son Steven, I should say, Stephen Jones, and he got in his dad's ear and just said, listen, for 3 years he has not been productive. We're paying this guy huge money. And I think, much like the decision they made years ago for Tony Romo to get T.O. out of the locker room, I think this is being made for Dak Prescott. We think we have our franchise quarterback. Let's put him in the best situation, and addition by subtraction may be the way to do that with Dez because of what you were just talking about, some of those distractions. So I think that's absolutely what happened here. No pay cut offered. Just we're going to send you on your way.
By the way, why did it take so long? Is it because Steven had to talk Jerry into it? This could have been done 3 weeks ago. Was that probably the reason?
I think they couldn't find Dez.
Oh, Jesus.
No. I think it was. Steven probably having to continue to talk to Jerry. They wanted to kind of let this thing play out a little bit, see what they could get in free agency. Could they get enough? And again, we can have that argument. Alan Hearns and some of these other people they brought in. Let's not act like they've assembled one of the great receiving corps in the NFL. But I think their decision was sort of probably already made. And so you're right. If you could have had Dez out there, could he have made more money on the open market? Could you have done him a solid by making this decision a little earlier? I think it probably was what you hinted at. I think Steven and others were in Jerry's ear saying, do this. They have a new wide receivers coach. Yep. I think they want a clean start with him. And I think also the offensive coordinator, I think Scott Linehan wanted Dez to go. I think Jason was neutral. So I think those are kind of the voices that were in everybody's ear. And finally, Jerry said, okay, we'll go ahead and do this.
By the way, they have a Doomsday podcast. It's Matt Mosley and Ed Werder, who are excellent reporters and remarkably tied to the Dallas Cowboys. I've been saying this now for a couple of weeks. Last year, I was mocked when I said the Rams are going to double their win total, and I like the Eagles to win the NFC East. Now I'm being equally mocked because I keep saying the Dallas Cowboys have won 22 games in the tougher NFC in 2 years. This year they went 9-7, and you had noise. The O-line had injuries. You had Zeke out. There was a lot of, you had Roger Goodell and Jerry Jones. There's a lot of noise, and the Cowboys' schedule now is easier. I believe, Matt, this to be true. They are an 11-win team again if they can stay healthy up front. They have found pass rushers now. They have, I believe, 10 or 11 draft picks, and they only have 2 absolute needs. They could use a defensive lineman and a safety and maybe a receiver. I think this Cowboy roster, and this is what Stephen Jones is arguing, I think it's now, for one of the few times of my life, an underrated Cowboy roster. Am I reaching?
That just sounds crazy to say.
I know, right?
By the time we get to training camp, we'll have these guys in the Super Bowl, so it is hard. But I think it's interesting what you say, a full season with Zeke, with no distractions, and I think you're smart. Boy, if you're going to Vegas and betting on this team, just look. It's every other year they sort of bounce back and have a nice season, and they obviously things got away from them last year. They thought last year could have been a Super Bowl year, but the whole Zeke thing hung over them. Now Dez is gone. Now, they'll miss some of his production, but I think Dak is a great leader. He will lean heavily on Zeke. Hopefully Zeke sort of cleans things up with all, stuff that's happening with him off the field. I think you may be onto something. Let me leave you with one other thing, though. I think Dez is going to do everything in the world to sign with either the Eagles or the Redskins. That's what he's doing right now. His agent is on the phone, guys, we'll sign for less money to play the Cowboys twice a year. He desperately is going to want to play them, and not just once a year. This is going to be a priority. Now, of course, that's revenge, and maybe that'll all, somebody else will offer him more money, and that'll all go away. But don't rule that out. These teams love to sort of see what happens, and then now that he's a free agent, and that will kill Jerry. That would just kill Jerry if some team was able to sign him, and then he would come back and put up big numbers against the Cowboys.
Finally, Matt Mosley, Dallas Morning News columnist, co-host of the Doomsday Podcast with my friend Ed Werder. This is a cautionary tale, and I see it all the time in sports. The kids come into pro sports, and they're not quite ready and mature enough to understand their gravitas and the position they play. And then by the time they figure it out, they've eroded as athletes because you got about 8 years of peak performance as a young man. About 30 years old, NBA, baseball, guys start to naturally deteriorate. Dez is no longer great. Years 4, 5, and 6, he was really a profoundly gifted, impactful player. But I think people sometimes forget, you don't, Matt, because you were there, his first couple years in the league, Dallas did him a lot of favors. If I recall reading stories about security, it's a sad story that Dez didn't quite get it initially and may have wasted several years now on the back end and in the front end.
Yeah, part of what's happened this offseason is there's been talk about, he's going to work with a wide receiver guru and try to become a better route runner. To your point, if you're doing that at age 29, what has caused you to wait that long? And we've seen it with other receivers. Now, again, he's put up great numbers, and he's ended up making huge money with the Cowboys based on some of those numbers. But much like in college, when he came out of college, it was, this guy has some issues showing up on time. Not a bad guy, just he's got life skills issues. Was his problem coming out of college. That's what the thing was on him. And you're right, he never quite got past all that. And in fact, when they finally gave him that big deal, he had stopped showing up to stuff, and it was getting to be a huge distraction. It's just he was certainly not someone like the greats who into their late 20s and early 30s constantly worked on their craft. And that's why the Jerry Rices of the world, there are only a few of them that played so long and were so brilliant, because at some point the athleticism starts to fade and then you have to have something else to come back on. And he doesn't really have that right now. And when you put that with being a distraction and showing up late all the time and all that and all the tweeting and all the social media, then it's probably time to move on.
By the way, if I turn on a Dallas radio station today, are people happy or not with this move?
Whoa, it's funny. There are all these camps. There's one station, the Cowboys flagship, that's in love with Dez because he'll come on their station, and they'll try to go after Jerry on this and talk about how great Dez is going to be elsewhere. Most people think probably this was the right move and Dez wasn't worth all the trouble. But yeah, there'll be divisions on this. There are some folks that love them some Dez Bryant on the Cowboys flagship station. So they'll be really going after Jerry.
Matt, great talking to you. Continued success, Matt.
Okay, appreciate it. See you, Colin.
All right, Matt Mosley, Dallas Morning News, podcast with Ed Werder, who's a wonderful guy too. Coming up next, we are all too impatient. We are all too impatient. I'm seeing it with how we're treating an NBA team. We're way too impatient. Car shopping's confusing. Dealer price, list price, invoice. TrueCar shows you what other people have paid for the car you want. You can recognize good price. TrueCar.com. Dallas Cowboys no longer in the Dez Bryant business. I have been rooting for this. I think Dallas has a very good roster. They could use a safety, but that's a marginalized position in football. They do need a down lineman. They could get Vita Vea out of Washington at the number 19 pick. That'd be terrific. I'm not sure if he can play the nose in the NFL, but he's an athletic big, 335 pounds, and they could use another wide receiver. It is an incredibly weak wide receiver draft, so they just hope Allen Hurns can stay healthy. But I really like this Dallas Cowboy team. I really do. I tell you, last year I picked the Rams and Carolina as teams that would double their win totals. Both did and more. I think the two teams you have to keep your eye on this year are the Dallas Cowboys and the LA Chargers. Both were 9-7. And the Cowboys had a series of distractions I do not believe they'll have. And they've developed pass rushers. The Chargers lost 4 games on a field goal kicker. And I don't believe that trend will continue. And that front office has shown an ability to land people in the draft. They've rebuilt their O-line. It is got a Pro Bowler at left tackle, a Pro Bowler at center, and a guard who sat out last year they absolutely love. The Chargers and Cowboys were 9-7. I think they're better, and I think Dez was a distraction for this locker room. Listen, man, you're a fan. Don't root for players to get rich. Root for your team being flexible. I never understand why fans are like, my God, got to take care of the player. What you got to be is flexible and not trapped paying more than guys are worth. Dez is not worth $16.5 large cap hit every year. He's worth about a $6 million cap hit. He first couple years, he was not ready to be a star. Talented, though. And then like years, what was it, John? 3, 4, 5, or 4, 5, 6, he was great. But now we're in like year 7, 8, 9. He's not great anymore. It's not great anymore. By the way, nobody has any patience. Myself included, I try to contextualize stuff. I try to have patience. I take a deep breath. I'm not trying to be contrarian, although many people think that. What I'm trying to say is, can we slow down? Let's not, jump out of windows on stuff. So the Lakers are doing their exit interviews. Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, Brandon Ingram, and some of the information's leaking out. Lonzo had his yesterday. Magic told him, kid, going to be the biggest summer of your life. Get stronger. But just to show you the lack of patience, take Brandon Ingram. In year 1, he averaged 9 points. This year 2, he averaged 16. He went from 2 assists to 4 rebounds to 5, 40% field goal shooting to 47, and 29% on threes to 39. With the same minutes mostly. These are 30 and 40% jumps. Yet if you turn on radio in Los Angeles, what do we do with Brandon Ingram? I've been guilty of this. His rookie year, he had 2 20-plus games. He had 8 times that this year, and the West was better. If he makes one more jump from year 2 to 3, that's as significant, he will be an all-star, averaging 22.5 points, 7 rebounds, and 7.5 assists, and shoot close to 50%. Even just a 25% growth, he would be a really good 20-point-a-game player. We all love Giannis, and he's made jumps in 5 straight years. You got to be patient. There's only 1 or 2 rookies a year that are ready, not just emotionally, but physically ready to dominate. Kyle Kuzma, he's 22. He's a bigger, stronger athlete right now than Brandon Ingram. Brandon's 20, Kyle's 22. That's 2 years in a college weight room. Ben Simmons, yes, he spent last year, his true rookie year, nutrition upgrades, working out with the Sixers, a pro basketball environment, weight training. Generally, most of these kids are not only not emotionally ready for the NBA, they're not fully grown yet. Brandon Ingram needs to put on about 8 more pounds. And that's what you can do with the Lakers staff and trainers. The Lakers process is working. It just doesn't have a catchy name. Colin, but Philadelphia, in the incredibly anemic East, has won 16 straight, 12 of them over tanking teams. The Lakers' last 16 wins, Oklahoma City, Miami, Spurs twice, Nuggets, Cavs. Their process is working too. They won 35 in the deepest Western Conference of my life, with major injuries to Lonzo and Brandon. They also lost 5 overtime games. They were also, in the last 20 games with Lonzo, 13-7 against primarily Western teams. They don't have a player yet as good as Ben Simmons and may never in this rebuild. But their process is working too. Patience. Take a deep breath. Veteran newsman John Goulet.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
Okay, Colin. Jerry Jones has released a statement
I love this.
regarding Dez Bryant. He said, quote, "As an organization, we hold Dez Bryant in the highest regard, and we are grateful for his passion, spirit, and contributions to this team for the past 8 years. He will always be a valued member of our family." This is where it gets interesting. Dez and I share a personal and professional relationship that is very strong, and he is one of just a handful of players with whom I have become that close to over the past 30 years. This was not an easy decision. It was made based upon doing what we believe is in the best interest of the Cowboys. This next statement Dez had a problem with. He said, "We arrived at this crossroad collectively with input from several voices within the organization. Ultimately, we determined it was time to go in a new direction." Dez responded to it on Twitter, saying keywords in this statement: several input, something I already knew. What it sounds like is Dez knows this is not Jerry making this decision, that it's other people. And Mosley kind of alluded to that a few minutes ago, that Stephen Jones was the one really behind this. Jason Garrett didn't really care one way or the other because Jason Garrett seems to always be in the middle. Scott Linehan, their offensive coordinator, may have had input. It sounds like Dez is aware that this was not Jerry's decision alone. He had to be talked into it.
And by the way, that's okay. When Jerry became less of an advisor during the last 5-6 drafts, the Cowboys' drafts have been better. You know, people don't want to say this and admit this. The last 6 drafts for the Cowboys, they built the best offensive line. They got David Irving and DeMarcus Lawrence, 2 really, really talented pass rushers. I like their young corners, Zeke and Dak. I mean, you got to tell you something. When Jerry's stepped back and let Steven run the draft, the Cowboys' drafts have been better. And I like Jerry, but he is a world-class maverick marketer businessman. I like Steven running the draft.
Well, the big one, too, was that Jerry wanted to draft Johnny Manziel. Yes. And he was talked into drafting, I believe it was Zach Martin instead.
Yeah.
Pro Bowl offensive lineman, disaster.
Yeah.
You know, that's what he was talked into.
Yeah.
So now that Dez is officially no longer a member of the Cowboys, we get to speculate on where he will go next. Matt Mosley from the Dallas Morning News was just on. This is what he told us about where Dez could go.
I think Dez is going to do everything in the world to sign with either the Eagles or the Redskins. I mean, like, that's what he's doing right now. Like, his agent is on the phone like, guys, we'll sign for less money to play the Cowboys twice a year.
Now, I don't know if he's that vengeful. He might be in this moment, but might calm down. Redskins, though, you could argue it kind of makes sense. Another team that's been floated out there, Baltimore Ravens, seem to always be looking for receiver help. Now, some of the more interesting teams that have been thrown out there, Patriots?
I just don't see it.
What about the Packers?
I don't think that works.
I would
at
argue
all.
his biggest moment in
doesn't.
history was at Lambeau Field.
Listen, I just don't think he's that good of a player anymore. That's my problem. He's even at half the cost. He's just not that good of a receiver.
Well, you could certainly do it in a highly incentive-based contract, I would say, if you wanted to. He might have a little value.
Yeah, he's got some.
Yeah. And finally, sticking with NFL wide receivers, Colin, I'm going to assume you have incentives in your contract. Most people in your position do. You get bumps for certain ratings things or whatever.
I used to, not as much now.
Sure, but it's a common thing in the profession,
sure.
right? So Mike Wallace, receiver for the Eagles, has maybe the easiest incentive of all time. He's going to get almost $600,000 from the Eagles if he shows up to camp on Monday under 250 pounds. Now, this is an easy incentive because he weighs 200 pounds. So all he had to do this offseason is not eat cupcakes and bacon for every meal and gain 50 pounds in order to make $585,000.
God.
Can we start having clauses like that? Can I just stay under 400 and you give me like a couple $100,000? Does that work for you?
I didn't know Mike Wallace had a major weight issue.
He does. That's
He's
what's
a
amazing.
speed receiver.
He doesn't. He's only like 10 pounds heavier than he was when he was drafted a long time ago. I'm not sure why he has a 250-pound clause.
That may have been a team just saying, listen, we're going to make some of these very Mike Wallace friendly. I mean, maybe, sometimes in negotiations, you give guys stuff, attainable bonuses, and then really hard to project and hard to attain bonuses. John Goulet with the news.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Lie News.
13 NBA seasons, coached the Phoenix Suns. He was the point guard in OKC before Russell Westbrook. My guy Earl Watson in the Herd today. Man, oh man, I'm reading some of the notes on you. So I was saying earlier is that it's okay, but on a Bill Simmons podcast, Kevin Durant said basically, I want to hoop and I want to play video games. LeBron wants to change the world. KD doesn't. The team is 11-9 in the last 20 games with KD and no Steph. Can we just now acknowledge he's not really an alpha, which is fine. He's just a world-class basketball player.
I think he is an alpha. I think he's a unique alpha. He's not the Kobe Bryant, Gary Payton, Michael Jordan alpha where they get into their teammates' face, they grill them, they cuss them out, and they put them in their place that they need to be on the court. He's more from the era, this new generational era, LeBron James. And Jordan Clarkson had an interesting quote. Someone asked him what was the difference in leadership between Kobe Bryant and LeBron James. He said, Kobe would cuss me out. LeBron puts his arm around me and tells me what I need to do. And that's kind of the generation that KD comes from.
No, that's really interesting. By the way, NBA coaches used to bark. NBA coaches now mostly put an arm around a player because the paradigm shifts. Players increasingly get coaches more fired. So, we're seeing this in the NFL. There's fewer yellers and screamers as coaches.
Except for Pop. Papa put his arm around you and cuss you out nicely. It's an art to cussing someone out in the game. Like, never embarrass them on the court.
Right.
Let them know you care for them, you love them, and then you can kind of grill them.
By the way, I'm watching the Warriors, and I generally think veteran teams with talent can flip a switch to some degree. I don't think the Warriors are great right now. I think they could lose a game or two in the first round. Your thoughts?
I don't think they get out of the first round.
What? Time out. Slow down. Put on the brakes. What? You don't think they get out of it?
I think Spurs do what the Spurs do, and that's win the first round convincingly, maybe 6 or 7 games, but they win it convincingly. Think about the game of basketball. Steph Curry creates pace.
Yes.
No Steph, no pace. KD's going to bring the ball up a lot, which means he's going to go at his own pace. And the last time I seen a 7-footer cannot create pace the way a natural point guard does.
By the way, analytics prove your point.
Exactly. So which tells me it's going to be half-court basketball. And we all know if you put the Spurs in half-court basketball, they're going to execute you to the 10th option LaMarcus Aldridge is going to dominate the series, and then it's going to be possession by possession down the stretch, and Pop has seen everything that there is to, like, controlling games.
By the way, Popovich has had a remarkable year. Manu's 40, Kawhi's missing in action, and Tony hasn't had a great year, and LaMarcus is mostly a mid-range jump shooter, and you're picking them to upset the Warriors. I think this is Pop's brilliant year.
Absolutely. Analytically, it's not supposed to happen, but sports isn't just analytics. Sports is a lot of strategy, a lot of mindset, a lot of taking advantage of the opportunity or the moment, and no one does it better than Coach Pop in any playoff series.
Earl Watson joining us. So, I was just talking about the lack of patience, and that Brandon Ingram made a really nice jump. Field goal percentage, points, rebound, assists. But you'll hear people in Los Angeles, and I myself included, Kuzma's good, I'm not sure. When you look at this Laker group, they're having exit interviews this week, and information's leaking out in regards to what's happening. We all subscribe to the theory, I do, they need a LeBron and Paul George. Do you subscribe to that theory?
I think it's a unique situation when you look at it, and this goes across the whole NBA with younger teams who think keeping a timeline of age is more important than a timeline of skill. And what I mean by that is, if the Lakers drafted this kid by the name of Kobe Bryant, who was phenomenal, and they would have said, let's build them slow, let's build Kobe slow with people around him who are his age, not skill, but age, we wouldn't have Kobe Bryant of today. But instead they said Kobe Bryant's skill is beyond his age. Let's build that with veteran players who match that skill. And now Kobe Bryant has to mentally mature up because we're playing at a certain level. Okay. Remember, the young Kobe, grow up, you're selfish, can't shoot every time, play team basketball. You're capable, but you need to mentally mature. And I think what the Lakers are going to do, they're going to surround their young group who had 35 wins, which is impressive. Luke, amazing job coaching under the
By the way, they lost
stress.
five overtime games. This could have been 39 wins. They had major injuries.
Easily, but Luke did a great job.
Yeah.
They're going to surround them with championship mentality. They're going to try to do their best to bring around guys who know how to win, not just playoffs, but win championships, so that younger core can now mentally mature because their game is beyond their age.
By the way, if you don't think the Warriors are getting out of the first round, and I certainly respect your opinion, I would guess that you think the Cavs are getting out of the East. Is that right? And that would be a Cavs-Rockets final?
Cavs-Rockets. I think the Cavs are getting out of the East. Toronto is going to have a tough battle with John Wall coming back. LeBron is LeBron. It doesn't matter what arena you put him in. When it goes into playoff basketball, every person that ever put on a jersey or grew up watching him who now putting on a jersey feel like it's a different person walking into that arena. And you talk about the Rockets. I once seen James Harden and DeMar DeRozan play on the same team during a lockout game. And I seen James Harden want to win so bad that he barely passed it to DeMar and ensued an argument. James wants to win a championship, James Harden. Chris Paul wants to win a championship. It's the perfect time. You have the Warriors who are injured. You have San Antonio who's kind of beat up. You can create more pace, more tempo. You've been playing the best in the West. Dominated, shoot, play fast, X Factor and Joe Johnson coming off the bench. And the setting is there.
Rockets, Cavs. Listen, I think it's time for Houston. It feels good. I thought Chris Paul and Harden would work, and my theory was it would work because of this. They're both really smart. And in life, if I hire two smart people, they'll be smart enough to go, okay, let's just get over our egos and let's just make it work. Like, it wasn't about styles. It was always like Chris Paul and Harden are smart players. Smart guys in any industry have more self-awareness and just figure crap out. And they have. They're beautiful together and almost instantly because they don't have, like LeBron and Wade worked. They weren't perfect together, but they're really high-functioning smart guys. So they sit down and have a glass of wine on an off night and go, okay, I'll give you this, you give me that, and I think it works. Finally, Westbrook's padding his stats. You don't have a problem with it, I'm told.
No one's padding stats.
Oh,
okay?
come on!
Let's just get that out there. The last time I checked, there's 9 other guys on the court. So you telling me Russ is sending out a text to his teammates and then the other team like, hey, I'm going to get all these free throw rebounds. No one jump, everyone move. Or yet, I'm going to get 20 rebounds. You guys let me get at least 15 of them. That's impossible to do.
You don't think he needed to have his greatest rebounding night ever in the last game of the season, and he did. You don't think he's aware of stats?
He got 20 rebounds. No one's going to let you get 20 rebounds in a game. And what he said was really true. If people could do it, they would do it. But they can't because it takes so much energy to do it. And Russ can dominate and play different styles of basketball. I would take this from Russ. I would say, Russ, you guys play phenomenal. That night you get 20 rebounds, 19 assists, 6 points. And Paul George had one of the best games that he had as your teammate. Maybe scale back more offensively and play the board again like that. Maybe go 15, 15, 15.
Oh, by the way, that's when he would be at his best.
That's when he would be at his best.
There's no doubt in my. I've said this before. If he got rid of the three-point shot, he finished last in the league at three-point percentage for guys that qualify. Stop shooting those. Distribute more. Be a finisher a dozen times a game because you can do it. But the reality is, Paul George just had a great last 5 games. He had been in a slump. Some of that is Westbrook, end of the year, peeling back a little. I think they're at their best when Westbrook gives you 18, though I know he could score 28.
Great teaching moment. Use it, teach it, let them build off that.
Earl Watson, good seeing you. This is The Herd. Great to have you back. By the way, Greg Cosell, regular on this show, is releasing now his draft analysis of all these players. On Josh Allen, the quarterback of Wyoming, good hell, listen to this. Allen is not naturally an accurate passer. Yeah, that's an issue. His ball placement issues, scattershot tendencies. He's not also a natural anticipation thrower or a touch thrower. Oh, great. All necessary in the NFL. He continues, sometimes I note with quarterbacks how they react to pressure, because in the NFL, you generally throw under duress more than college. There were snaps in which Josh Allen climbed the pocket, kept his eyes downfield. It's what a quarterback needs to do. There were other snaps in which Allen dropped his eyes in response to pressure, and sometimes he was perceiving pressure that wasn't even there. That's called fear. Let me tell you something. Every year I project a bust of the draft. It's Josh Allen. He is a total project. And just think of the project quarterbacks that have come into this league in the last few years, first or second round. Now, when I say project, it's different than a prospect. Sam Darnold and Josh Allen are top prospects. They're capable of playing now. A project equals a gifted kid who needs work and time. Christian Hackenberg was a project. Fail, can't play. Tebow was a project. Paxton Lynch, a project. Terrell Pryor was a project. Sam Darnold and Josh Allen, Carson Wentz are prospects. They're ready to play. They'll be overwhelmed at times, but they're ready to play. These comparisons to Carson Wentz are inaccurate. Carson Wentz was a very accurate college thrower, a better athlete, and came from a winning program. Wyoming doesn't win. Josh Allen's not accurate, and he's not close to Carson Wentz as an athlete. We were comparing Carson Wentz, I was, before he got drafted, to Andrew Luck. He's that kind of player. I didn't think he was going to be this good this fast, but he looked like Andrew Luck. Big, mobile, arm, winning, 65%. You know, he was a prospect, not a project. Josh Allen's going to be overdrafted, potentially to a bad team with a history of whiffing on the quarterback like the Cleveland Browns, and the reports are Cleveland likes him. Overdrafting, what does that mean? Overdrafting is similar to giving a young kid in your family too much responsibility too early. If let's say, for instance, I have a will. I would make my daughter the executor of my will. She is ready to handle the death of me and handing out portions of the will. My son's 12, he's not. Now, obviously, at 12, nobody would be. But at some point, I'll have to make a decision on who's the executor of my will. And you do it generally with the more mature kid, the kid you trust to hand out the whatever. And that's what overdrafting is. You're taking a kid too early. Therefore, because of what you're paying him, you're forcing him into duty in year one, and he's simply not ready for it. Josh Allen's not ready to start in the NFL. I say this about he and Lamar Jackson. They both need to sit and watch. And that will dramatically increase their chances of success. God, the Browns and quarterbacks, if they were adoptive parents, they'd get rejected. They're just not, this is not good. So Greg Cosell, listen, man, the thing that jumps out to me, he's not a naturally accurate passer. I don't know if you can teach that. I really don't. It's like, I'll give you an example. Remember, what was the wide receiver? Was it Braylon Edwards for Michigan? He was never a great catcher of the football. He just wasn't. He wasn't in high school. He wasn't in college. He wasn't in the pros. He was long. He was fast. He could run the routes. He just wasn't a great catcher of the football. You either have great hands or you don't. Now, you can take bad hands and make them marginal, but I don't remember a receiver in my life saying at 22, bad hands, at 24, Steve Largent. It just doesn't work that way. And I think you either have, you could take a chef who's 22 and struggling with frying pans, and you're like, here, we're going to put you in a kitchen for 2 years. That's different. I think there are certain things that are innate. Like, I'll give you an example. You can become a better shooter. There's no question. Ray Allen was a much better shooter year 5 than year 1 in the league. Ben Simmons, though, will never be a great shooter. He'll never be a great shooter. Larry Bird was a great shooter at 16, 21, 31. Great shooters, some of it's innate. The style, the feel, the touch. I don't know, man. If you're not an accurate passer, good luck. This is The Herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening, live in Los Angeles, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio. No TV today. Joe Vardon just got out of Cavaliers practice. He'll join us in 5 minutes. Cavaliers reporter, Cleveland.com, the Cleveland Plain Dealer. He's really good. We bring him 4 or 5 times on a year. He's excellent. NBA playoffs start tomorrow. Dez Bryant, no longer a Dallas Cowboy. Dump Dez, Proposition 88. Worked. Thank you, voters. One of them being Jerry Jones. Matt Mosley, Dallas Morning News, joined us an hour ago. Told us what went into the Cowboys' decision to finally release Dez Bryant.
Jerry loves this guy like a son, and he kind of had a similar relationship with other players over the years, Dion, a little bit with T.O., but I think he felt extremely close to Dez. But I think Steven, he got in his dad's ear and just said, listen, for 3 years, he has not been productive. I think, much like the decision they made years ago for Tony Romo, I think this is being made for Dak Prescott. Let's put him in the best situation.
I think Dak Prescott, though not as gifted as Andrew Luck or a Carson Wentz or as special as an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson, I think Dak's a franchise quarterback. And I think he's going to grow and get better. Listen, people forget this. Tom Brady's first 3 or 4 playoff runs, Super Bowl or not, that team was not led by Tom Brady. Jared Goff was awful. Last year with the right coach, Jared Goff was really good. You got to give these kids time. Brandon Ingram, Lakers. First year to second, different player. Second to third, makes one more jump. He's an all-star. I think Dak's a franchise player. I didn't out of college. I tell you before, I watched him at Mississippi State. I thought he was Tebow. I thought he was a better version of Tebow. He had a better throwing motion, but an elongated throwing motion, and he ran too much. But he just kind of popped. I'll tell you, I watched him. I didn't think he was an accurate thrower of the football in college. Greg Cosell admitted it. And in the NFL, I'm like, no, it's pretty accurate. He got more accurate. So better offensive line, maybe better coaching. But I think Dak, he won 22 games in 2 years. With last year, all sorts of noise, major suspensions. His first year, the defense was kind of awful. Last year, they were better, and they got 10 picks and only a couple of holes to fill. And they went 9-7 last year in a very, very rough NFC. NFC is like the Western Conference in the NBA. It is significantly better than the Eastern Conference. The AFC is about Brady or Big Ben. The Eastern Conference is about LeBron. The Western Conference is full of talent. The NFC is full of talent. Now that San Francisco, a dog, has Garoppolo, they'll no longer be a dog. Car shopping is confusing. Terms like dealer price, list price, and invoice. TrueCar shows you what other people paid for the car you want. Save $3,000 off MSRP. Go to TrueCar.com. Several times a year, we talk to Joe Vardon. Cleveland.com. Works at the Cleveland Plain dealer. And Joe Vardon just left practice interviewing Cavs players. They open up with the Indianapolis Pacers, who have had, in that trade that sent Paul George to the Thunder, Victor Oladipo has had a remarkable year. Coming back home, he played for the Indiana Hoosiers, and Joe Vardon is joining us. All right, you just left practice. I was talking the other day, Joe. I said, when Kevin Love or Chris Bosh playing with LeBron are allowed to be the number 2 option, they're emotionally happier and totally engaged. When Bosh was forced to be a 3rd option and Kevin Love was in Cleveland, it just doesn't work. I'm watching Kevin Love now be the 2 option, Joe, and he feels more engaged and more consistent. Now, you're there every night and every practice. Tell me, Kevin Love this year to last, he is going to be more necessary, is he not?
Well, Colin, first of all, I'm wondering if you have access to my computer, because I literally got up from my desk at the practice facility writing this very story to come on your show. So I have all of these numbers in my head.
Okay.
Kevin was pretty good in the playoffs last year. He averaged a career best 16.8 points and 10.2 rebounds. It was by far his best postseason of his 3, playing as the 3rd option behind LeBron and behind LeBron and Kyrie. So Kyrie goes to Boston, and from the start of this season until January 2nd, which is a significant date I'll get to in a minute, Kevin Love was averaging 20.2 points and 10.2 rebounds, shooting 14 shots a game, and knocking down 41% of his threes. So he had become Minnesota Kevin, the best version of Minnesota Kevin. On January 2nd, Isaiah Thomas came back. And all of a sudden, Kevin became the 3rd option, but it was like a 3rd option with like an anchor around his ankles, and he was awful. He was the worst version of himself in that whole month that Isaiah was here. So it totally makes your point. Kevin Love, as a 3rd option on a team here, was good. He was good enough to win an NBA title in 2016. But the numbers say when he is alone with LeBron, Kevin Love is great.
Yeah.
And they win a lot of games.
Yep. And I think especially in the East, sometimes, and I think it's just Kevin Love and Chris Bosh are very similar. They're thoughtful people. They're thinkers. And I think to go from a star in an environment to a 2, if you're playing with LeBron, you can deal with that. But no star wants to become a 3rd wheel sitting in the back of the car. And I think both Bosh and Kevin Love, thoughtful, smart, emotional players, struggled with that. Now, we move into the playoffs. What's interesting here is everybody in the league's beat up. Outside of George Hill, aren't the Cavs as healthy as they've been all year?
Well, yes and no. I think George Hill's actually is probably close to 100%.
Okay.
The guy that you got to worry about though is Kyle Korver. He's had this foot thing. He had the very unfortunate circumstance where his younger brother died.
Yeah.
And it cost him, a week plus. But while he was out, he had this lingering foot issue that he was dealing with before his brother passed. And it's hampering him, Colin. It really is. And that's bad because they would like to start him. They love the way that he plays with LeBron and Kevin, and now they're going to play Jeff Green too. So, Jeff could be more of a slasher with Korver out there bombing threes, but it doesn't look like he's healthy enough to be a starter and play those kinds of minutes. So I think they're going to go with Rodney Hood. I'm just telling you, if Korver were right, they would start him.
LeBron played 82 games, and this year he's been a little more self-congratulatory. He got criticized last year for taking a bunch of days off, which didn't bother me, but bothered a lot of people. This year, Harden's taken a bunch of days off. So LeBron plays 82 games. I'm watching a game about a week ago. He's in the game with a minute and a half left against the Knicks, and I'm asking myself, what are you doing? The 82 games was, he plants a flag. I can do it. Was it necessarily the smartest thing for him to do?
I am kind of over this. For a couple of things. He has taken his level of training and personal health and whatever you want to say about it, he's taken it to another level. I mean, like he appears indestructible. Secondly, this team does not practice. Period. They don't practice. They don't. And actually the records show like the less they practice, the better they do. The most they practiced was in January when they were awful. So that's funny, but they don't practice. And if they do practice, LeBron often sits on the side with ice and just kind of relaxing. So they take care of him. Obviously, considering what you saw him do in March and April, averaging 30 points and nearly a triple-double, best in the league, he's fine. He's been playing more and more over the last couple of years instead of less, either in minutes per game or in this case, games. So I think he's fine.
Yeah. By the way, did LeBron have a response, or was he asked, about the Pat Riley comments earlier this week that LeBron made the right decision leaving Miami? Did he ever talk about that?
He said he would talk about it on the side, which he has not done yet. But he kind of got a smirk on his face there.
Yeah. Okay, so I like them to win the East. I think Toronto will push them and make them uncomfortable. I don't think Philly could. Do you take anything from Philly's last couple of wins over the Cavs in the regular season? LeBron's done some of these kind of psychological games where he's had statement games, come out of games not wanting to give a team any edge going into the playoffs. You take anything from those last couple of Sixer Cavs games?
No, they fell behind by 30 in that game the other night that was so fun to watch.
That was a back-to-back, though. They had played the night before.
They're right. The Cavs played back-to-back. They had to come from 17 down in that first night. So they were just going through the motions in the first half, and then they come out in the second half and decide to put their shoes on their correct feet, and they play like gangbusters. I mean, LeBron goes for 35 in the second half. Like, look, I like Philly. I love the way they've been playing right now. Ben Simmons is going to be great for a long time, but they have no experience playoff-wise out of their best players. And that LeBron always says experience is the best teacher, and they don't have it. So if they see the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals, I don't think there'd be enough there.
Joe Vardon, Cleveland.com, Cleveland Plain Dealer, just left the Cavs practice. Great talking to you, Joe. Have a great weekend and enjoy the playoffs.
Thanks, brother.
Joe Vardon. Doug Gottlieb may just mosey in here before the end of the show. It is great to have you in. NBA playoffs start tomorrow. So my staff this morning, I'm only doing radio, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio today. Boy, our numbers are just great. Our streaming, our podcast, our terrestrial. I want to thank everybody who continues to listen to our show. We're just very proud of all the work on our staff, and it's just been great. Absolute pleasure. Staff came in this morning. They said, hey, the season's ended. Why don't we go back to the day before the season when you made predictions and see how many were right and wrong? So I'm just going to throw a few of these out here. John, I'll let you react on the board. CP3 to Houston will work. I got that one right. My theory was smart people figure stuff out. And though their styles weren't ideal, I just thought it would work. Clippers will be a mess with Blake Griffin leading them. Yeah, I'm not a Blake Griffin guy. Again, I think he's selfish. I think he's limited. I don't think he makes players better. I think at times he's a diva. I think he's talented. But everybody always blamed Chris Paul. Oh, boy. Chris Paul's difficult. Yeah, Chris Paul's a legend. He's great. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. Blake Griffin was mostly, in the prime of his career, the league's best volleyball spiker. Ben Simmons will be better than Lonzo Ball. Yeah, I think Ben has a chance. I didn't think Ben would be this good this fast, but Lonzo is just a limited athlete. And in the history of the NBA, generally superstars are really good athletically. I mean, Larry Bird wasn't the world's best athlete, but he was 6'10" and the best shooter in the league. I mean, Magic wasn't the world's best athlete, but he was the first 6'9.5" point and had incredible communication and, leadership skills. Let's see. OKC will win 50 games, but not the title.
It's close. I'll give it like partial credit. They didn't win 50, but they were right there. What did they win, 48, 49?
You're not going to give me credit for that one? That's kind of lame.
Partial? Half credit?
I had to hit the exact number?
Well, 50 plus, I believe. I don't think you said it had to be 50 exactly.
I predict the Utah Jazz major step backwards. Yeah, I whiffed on that one. Wrong. I still can't figure out how you are winning 45 games with a rookie as your best player, Joe Ingles undrafted, Rudy Gobert out for 30 games, and you traded Gordon Hayward. I mean, it's a coaching job of the year by Quinn Snyder.
It's also not your fault that Donovan Mitchell's this good. Nobody saw that coming either.
By the way, Rick Pitino told him he needed to stay another year in college. They have been the story of the year. I just tend to...
And if you can't trust Rick Pitino, then who can you trust?
No kidding. I said with Philadelphia, F the process. Yeah. That wasn't one of my better predictions. Listen, Covington was a streaky at best player. He's been better than I thought. Embiid's now healthy, and Ben Simmons has been terrific. They're good. I didn't think that I had enough three-ball shooters, and they picked up two at like the trading deadline. So good front office move. I had Milwaukee as potentially the number 2 team in the East, too.
Wrong.
Giannis is a great scorer, but again, is he making teammates better? And hold on. For 1 year, Cleveland will be better than Boston. Well, I don't get credit for that. Well, what? You're looking at...
But the Celtics finished as a higher seed and had 2 major injuries. Like I don't think you predicted Gordon Hayward would snap his ankle 2 minutes into the season.
All right, you can give me the wrong, man.
Wrong.
All right.
Wrong.
I didn't say to give it to me twice. Once was enough. There's no reason to go crazy on that. Yeah, it was fun. By the way,
overall pretty accurate. I'll give you that.
No,
you did a pretty good job.
Yeah. Listen, if Philadelphia is just better than I thought, Ben Simmons is better than I thought, he's really taken over games. Embiid got hurt in the last 6-7. He's just been great. He really does remind me of Magic Johnson. He's not as verbal as Magic. I don't think we'll ever see a player quite like Magic. We just never will in our lives. We're never going to see another Tiger Woods. And we're just not. We're just not. MJ's taken away so much of the attention. Magic Johnson was absurd. God, he was just unbelievable. He walked into this league and just took it over. He was the most likable, the most discussed, the most competitive. God, he was great. By the way, I don't want to be snarky, but there's bias in the media, right? And bias in the media isn't just what the media says on a topic. And there is bias there. But it's mostly what topic the media chooses to cover. You see real bias in the media. We're going to ignore this story that doesn't fit our narrative and pounce on this story that does. Am I crazy to suggest ESPN, which has become more of an NBA network than an NFL network, there's 7 to 8 teams actively tanking, and ESPN has barely touched the topic? Bad for fans, bad for integrity. Am I being snarky? Like 7 teams are tanking. You have to Google players. I mean, it's bad for the fan, total ripoff for fans, and not good for the integrity of the sport. But we're talking about that guy who kneeled at a football game. Really? A backup quarterback now at best? I gave that 4 minutes today. That's on that network constantly. We have a league, a quarter of it's tanking. It's kind of a topic. I've been talking about it all week. I think a lot of it's David Stern was a rough commissioner and a yeller and a screamer, and owners would get an earful. Now you got like 7 teams tanking, and Adam Silver's a little more reticent. I don't like to use the word meek. He's more of a peaceful negotiator, a respectful negotiator, and fear and intimidation works. And threats, unfortunately, sometimes do work. And Stern yelled, screamed, and threatened, and Silver doesn't, and I think the league's taking advantage of him. There are some tanking jobs going on now that are just brutal. Newsman John Goulet.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
Colin, you mentioned this earlier in the show that Steve Kerr said Steph was not even close to coming back yet. Take a listen to this sound again.
I mean, he's not practicing yet or anything, and I think 3 weeks is Saturday. That's when we said the doctors would reevaluate him. He's not anywhere close to playing, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, Yahoo Sports is reporting that he will come back at some point during the Western Conference semifinals.
That's the second series.
Right. That's obviously a little vague because you don't know how long the series is and when. That's a little tough to pin down. But that's later. Remember, Steph said, well, I hope to play the first round. And Kerr said, probably not the first round. Now we're to mid-second round, which could, when could that get pushed back? You heard Earl Watson on earlier say he thinks they're in trouble against the Spurs without Steph.
Oh, I think it'll be
Spurs' favor.
I picked 6 games Warriors. They're going to lose a game or 2 in that series.
Let's say they win it, but a tough series. They have to, seeding-wise, play the Blazers second round. I mean, are you starting to get a little concerned now? If you have to play the Blazers a couple times without Steph?
I don't love the way the Blazers match up with the Warriors. I think the coaching's very even there. I just think what's happened, I've said this to you before, when they write the book on LeBron, durability better be the 2nd or 3rd chapter. It better not be the 8th. Look at the stars right now in this league. Kyrie Irving is officially injury prone. Steph Curry is officially injury prone. John Wall is officially injury prone. I think you have to say there are injury concerns with Kevin Durant and Brandon Ingram. I mean, I'm telling you, it's LeBron's ability to still, night in and night out, give you that is all worldly. It's just hard to explain. It's absurd. So I don't think the Warriors are the same team. I think they're still good. I just don't think they're the same pace, tempo, team, spacing. It's different.
A Lithuanian journalist said yesterday that a Lakers scout was seen in the stands of one of LiAngelo Ball's games in Lithuania.
Oh.
Now, remember, he declared for the draft. Very unlikely that he actually gets drafted. He's not really good enough for a team to pick him. However, is it worth it for the Lakers to give him maybe a spot on their G League team simply as a favor to their starting point guard? It's not a crazy narrative. We had Jordan Palmer in here earlier this week. Not a coincidence he was on the Bengals when Carson Palmer was their quarterback. Steph Curry's brother, Seth Curry, has now become a nice NBA player, but he started with the Santa Cruz Warriors.
Yeah, the difference is their dad's not crazy.
Agreed, but I think the sentiment would be they're doing it for LeVar Ball. I would argue teams do this for their players all the time, and why not, as a favor to Lonzo, hey, we'll give your brother a shot at the G League team. It's not hurting the roster. You're not saying, hey, we're going to start him in the backcourt with you.
Do I want another member of the Ball family? Like, I'm dealing with one now.
But you're going to be, that family is involved with you.
Okay, here's what I would do. Is this legal? I would sign LiAngelo and then force him to play in Lithuania for 4 more years. And let Lonzo develop.
I don't know that the Lakers have a Lithuanian affiliate. I don't know that they can force them to do that.
Can't do that? All right.
Might be a little tough.
It might be. But I didn't know Jordan Palmer played with the Bengals when Carson did.
And that's not saying Jordan Palmer couldn't make the NFL.
Oh, he did.
But there's 32 teams.
Sure.
I don't think it's a coincidence he was on the Bengals when Carson Palmer was there.
Yeah.
Just like I don't think it's a coincidence Seth Curry was on the Santa Cruz Warriors. That's all I'm saying. It's not unprecedented. It's not just a Ball family thing.
Yeah.
And finally, earlier this offseason, the Browns traded for wide receiver Jarvis Landry from the Dolphins. They have now signed him to an extension that's a little bit excessive.
Oh, Jesus.
Landry was given a 5-year, $75 million deal.
Gosh.
With, get this, $47 million guaranteed.
Oh, for a receiver?
Now, listen, Landry is solid. He's played in every game for his 4 years in the
Big,
NFL.
physical, fast.
22 touchdowns in 4 years.
I
with
like
the
him.
Dolphins question. Yeah, I was, as a Cowboys fan, was hoping the Cowboys would have signed him.
Would New England have signed this deal?
That's the Bucs just gave Mike Evans, member, a big deal.
Yeah.
He's a number one receiver. $9 million less guaranteed for Mike Evans than Jarvis Landry. I mean, what if you draft your guy Darnold and they don't really have great chemistry?
Listen, Cleveland can't get out of their own way. They're going to pick Josh Allen, who's going to be a bust, and they're overspent. I come to the conclusion there are just certain organizations, they just can't get out of their own way. You and I have worked in this business. Greg, how long have you been in this business?
15 years.
Okay, you've been in it 15. I've been in it 25. Goulet, how long for you?
About 10.
Okay. You don't even have to name names. We have all worked with somebody in this business that is really talented that can't get out of their own way. We have all worked with somebody like that. That's the reality of every business. Cleveland and their ownership group and their front office, well, what are you doing? That's a massive contract.
Imagine, too, let's say you draft Josh Allen, who you pointed out is inaccurate. What is a possession receiver going to do with an inaccurate quarterback?
Do we consider Landry a possession?
Well, no, but he's not a deep threat guy, right?
He's a playmaker, though. He's got a little Dez in him. He's a playmaker.
He is, but I mean, you're going to pay guy. If this guy's inaccurate, why would you sink money into a receiver? You can only catch a ball you can reach.
Jesus, it is. I had a dinner last night with somebody, and we were just talking about this. We got into this discussion. It was a business discussion about you as you age. I get less sympathetic for certain people in my business because they keep making the same mistakes over and over. Like Cleveland, just draft Sam Darnold, and then with your next pick, get Bradley Chubb, and you'll have 2 great pass rushers for 5 years, your franchise quarterback. Don't pay wide receivers big money. God, it's just not that hard. All right, veteran newsman John Goulet.
Well, that's the news.
And thanks for stopping by.
The Herd Line
The other
News.
story is Dez Bryant is no longer a Dallas Cowboy. I agree with it, and for a variety of reasons that we have discussed. The other thing is Rick Barry came on, Hall of Famer today. And, it's easy to say Steph's out, Warriors in trouble, that's going to get some clicks. But Rick Barry watches every Warrior game, and he's worried about the Warriors' chances with Steph Curry out.
It's such a difficult thing to beat them. But the problem now is they're not healthy. I'm really concerned about them. They're going to have a difficult time in the playoffs, trying to continue to advance, to win. Even if Steph were to come back, what are the chances of him being at the level he needs to be?
These dynasties never last as long as we think. And it's always 2 things, injuries or egos. And they've been fairly ego-free, but injuries. Kyrie Irving and Steph Curry, love them both. They're injury prone. You can't. Westbrook had an injury. He's not injury prone. Westbrook's not injury prone. He's had an injury. But Durant, John Wall, Kyrie Irving, Steph Curry, they're injury prone. And that's a real thing. So there you go. I'm so glad I worked today. We were not on television today, so I was all excited because I don't have to shave, and I just look like hell. And so I came in today, and it's like we got the Dez Bryant story broke during our show, which I just love when we have, John and I and Greg are legitimate big-time journalists. So when we have a chance to put our teeth into a journalism story, we just grab it. And the Dez Bryant story is our story today. Matt Mosley, Dallas Morning News. Dez Bryant was going to be expensive. Jerry Jones loved him. And Stephen Jones apparently talked Jerry Jones out of re-signing him. And, I look at Dez, and I do feel some sadness. He's one of these young men who runs into pro sports, and he's so gifted, but he's not quite ready emotionally, maturity-wise, to kind of understand, okay, man, committed, in early, bet early. And I talked to Matt about that I just don't think – I think he wasted 3 years at the top of his career and in the last couple at the end of his career.
Part of what's happened this offseason is there's been talk about, he's going to work with a wide receiver guru. And if you're doing that at age 29, what has caused you to wait that long? Again, he's put up great numbers, but when he came out of college, it was, this guy has some issues showing up on time. He's got life skills issues.
Yeah.
Was his problem coming out of college. That's what the thing was on him. When they finally gave him that big deal, he had stopped showing up to stuff. It was getting to be a huge distraction. He was certainly not someone like the greats who constantly worked on their craft, and that's why the Jerry Rices of the world, when you put that with being a distraction, it's probably time to move on.
Yeah. So Dez Bryant, no longer a Cowboy. We'll see where he lands. Some suspect he wants to stay in the NFC East, play the Cowboys twice a year. We'll see. Doug Gottlieb's around the corner, I'm told. He'll be on Speak for Yourself today. Doug Gottlieb, Fox Sports Radio, FS1 basketball guy. It's interesting. We had Rick Barry on and Earl Watson. Earl's like, this thing is real with Steph. They don't play the same. They don't push the same buttons. And Rick Barry, who watches every Warrior game and knows what he's doing, said they're going to lose some games. Couldn't I argue the worst team to face for them would be a really smart veteran team that can manipulate officials, the game? The Spurs are kind of a tough matchup for them.
I actually disagree. I agree with what Earl and Rick said. I disagree in terms of the Spurs. Look, the Spurs got way more out of, if it's an orange, as the orange is the analogy,
they
right?
Squeezed everything.
They squeezed everything, then they went to the rind, and they're like, no, the white part's the good part, the healthy part for you, right? Like your grandma used to tell you.
Right.
Like there's nothing left. They petered out kind of down the stretch. They're not nearly as good as their record. As opposed to, I actually think the Timberwolves, and the matchup's not great with them with Houston, but look at the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are the only team in 2018 to lose at home to the Memphis Grizzlies. The only team. Memphis Grizzlies tanked so well, they only won one road game since the new year, and that was against Minnesota. Minnesota just no-showed against Atlanta, against some of the bottom teams. The truth is, they're actually pretty good. San Antonio's record would tell you they're a much better team than they actually are. Yeah. Without Kawhi Leonard, they have no chance. And here's one thing that people haven't paid enough attention to. At the end of the season, when Steph got hurt, instead of moving everybody up, instead of playing Sean Livingston and Andre Iguodala more starters minutes, they continue to play them their exact same roles for when Steph returns to save their legs. Instead, Quinn Cook's their starting point guard. He was in the G League. Now, look, they gave him a long-term deal. It's a great story. I'm not trying to diminish the story of Quinn Cook, but when you bring in a 12th guy, you don't put him on in your starting lineup. They did that because they want to save their veterans' legs. Starting a G League point guard is the reason that they've fallen. It's one of the big reasons that they've fallen apart. That, and they didn't care. They did the same thing. They weren't playing Josh Pachulia a lot. I think they'll be fine in this first series against the Spurs without him.
By the way, I was saying this. When Durant was in OKC, you knew him because you played college basketball in the state and have good contacts there. But, he was likable. He was LeBron's guy. He was good. A little bit of a mystery. We didn't know a lot about him. His mom was on the court. It was just nobody didn't like him. But it's like when you run for president. We already know you're successful, but we start finding all the warts.
Yeah.
Okay. Once you get the spotlight on you, the big job, we know you're good enough to get the big job, but now a couple years later, I look at KD, and I learn things I didn't know. He's not really an alpha. He's not really a leader. He's got absurd rabbit ears. And frankly, they're 11-9 in the last 20 with Steph, and without him, he's not as valuable as I once thought he was.
Well, I've heard you spread this narrative. He had an excellent season defensively. He's probably going to be runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year. So he's changed that. I think with him, it's a yearning for respect. He obviously doesn't take criticism all that well. I go back to when he was in Oklahoma City, and he was playing poorly against the Memphis Grizzlies, and there was the Mr. Unreliable headline. Yeah. And, of course, he was he was so shielded from criticism in Oklahoma City that the newspaper actually apologized. I've never heard of that in the history of journalism. Like, hey, we're sorry that a guy. What we're saying is you're normally reliable and suddenly you're unreliable, which is actually true statistically and in reality. And even though we're pointing out something that is factually correct, we're going to apologize to you because you're mad, right? So obviously he doesn't handle it. But to say he's the only guy with rabbit ears, dude, I listen every day. You talk about LeBron James. Who has bigger rabbit ears than LeBron James? He's constantly making comments made about him. I thought the big thing that jumped out to me in the last week and a half was when Steve Kerr called them out for their effort, and his response was, I thought the other team had a better strategy than we did.
Oh.
Strategy is code for coaching. Right? And so what he's saying, like, look, you're going to call us out? Fine, we're going to call you out. So there is something weird in Golden State. I do think they're ripe for the pickings, but I also think that as arrogant as you can be with the whole idea, remember the infomercial, the clap on?
Yeah.
Like, I think the Golden State Warriors think they're the clapper. Like, we'll just clap on and we're going to play.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous game to play.
Especially in the West.
But yes, but I think getting the San Antonio Spurs, because they don't have Kawhi, because they come in kind of limping in down the stretch with a second-year point guard, they're not quite like Marcus Aldridge doesn't really scare them all that much. I think they'll be okay, but they're playing a dangerous game.
So I was thinking about this yesterday. When Barry Bonds was using whatever he was using, there were a lot of people...
Steroids. Massive steroids.
A lot of people were using them. But what really bothered us was that he was going to take a very decent man who dealt with things no human should have to in the 70s, Hank Aaron, and he was going to take him out of the record books. And Hank's a good human being and has never sought attention, a gentleman and a decent person. And Barry's just going to scrub him from the record books.
That's a great point.
Westbrook, similarly, would be a 27, 10, and 6 guy. But goosing 3 stats makes Oscar Robertson less relevant. Another decent guy who has never sought attention. That's what bothers me. If you're a Rudy Gay, let's say you're Steven Jackson, and we goose your numbers because you're going to have your first triple-double. Right. It doesn't change history. They don't make statues in record books. Westbrook and Bonds make really decent guys who work their arse off less relevant, and it bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, it bothers me some. It also, my approach is it does make me appreciate the Big O a little bit more, right?
Okay, so you appreciate him more.
I do. I appreciate Henry Aaron, considering Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer, but had to juice up and hit 73 home runs in his mid to late 30s in one season, and hit, over 40 for several years in his late 30s, something we haven't seen before and won't see since because the human body just is incapable of that without help. It at least the way I look at the world, it makes me think, man, Hank Aaron was amazing to do it. Dead ball era, half the country didn't want him to do it, and he's always been a gentleman. I think the same thing of the Big O. But I agree with you. I've never no one's ever liked the guy who helps the stats.
And
no
by the
one's
way,
ever remember there's a women's basketball player, she played at UConn, and she needed 2 points to set the all-time record, and she tore her knee, and then they did like a jump ball and threw it down to her, and nobody played defense. I thought that was weak, just like I think Russell Westbrook averaging a triple-double is weak.
I think there is a greater burden of responsibility on superstars. Like, again, Lance Armstrong takes Greg LeMond out of a book. If Lance Armstrong was 183rd best cyclist, I wouldn't care. I think there's a greater responsibility if you're Magic, Mike Trout. And I'm not saying these guys to just do it the right way, because I think you are. I always joked about A-Rod using when he got caught, right? It was like George Clooney getting plastic surgery. When is enough enough? You're good looking enough.
Sure.
No more. By the way, Dez Bryant is no longer a Cowboy. Here's what's funny. It seems so obvious. Like this, if you and I were running the Cowboys, we'd be like, yeah, we're going to get rid of that $16 million cap hit. Isn't Jerry odd? Jerry has this relationship, often with guy. Maybe it's one of the nicest things about him. When he sees a troubled player, he puts his arms around him. Maybe Jerry sees himself in the player. But today, we're announcing something that is the most obvious thing in the league. Dez needed to be cut. And we're almost like, Dallas, congratulate. New England would have done this a year ago, right?
Well, that's the kind of the peculiar thing, right? Had he done it earlier, had he done it in March, Dez probably would have had more options. Now, it would also be safe to say that the market has been set, and it's a pretty good market for top-level wide receivers. I mean, we've seen, we saw Landry's going to get $15 million a year to be in Cleveland. Sammy Watkins is getting $16 million a year.
That one's...
He has proven in two different places he couldn't be a number one wide receiver.
No, he disappears for a month.
He was the fourth best wide receiver with the L.A. Rams, and the Kansas City Chiefs gave him $16 million a year.
I don't get it either.
I don't either. And I mean, look, Andy Reid will probably get them to the playoffs, and they'll lose in the first round anyway. But whatever. The point is, so at least the market's been set, but there are, right now, a lot of these teams are salivating at thought. It's not a wide receiver heavy draft.
Right.
But you think, all right, I'd rather get the cheaper version than get Dez. I almost think he did him a disservice by waiting this long and drawing it out
because now
this
so
much.
many teams have their receiver issues. So
Right.
if you wanted a veteran receiver, you've got one.
You got one veteran receiver, you got one. And if you decide to go through the draft, you're already kind of invested in the draft. And would you take him? So I think the whole thing's fascinating. To anybody who thinks he didn't get the ball enough, he got 138 targets last year.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, 138.
How many catches?
66.
John, you're our resident Cowboy expert. So 50% catch rate.
You have to force him the ball early, otherwise he stops trying. So a lot of those incompletions are like, just throw him the ball so he stays engaged, and then we'll run the offense after that.
Look, when Tony Romo called the games, I thought he did a good job pointing out, like, Dez is one of those guys. I played with a guy, actually his name Desmond Mason, in college.
I remember.
And you had to throw the ball up to him, get him a dunk early in the game, and they never threw the ball up to Dez Bryant. But he doesn't separate. I don't think he's a lead wide receiver. I think the Cowboys did what we all thought they should do. They just waited a while to do it.
By the way, I don't think his hands are that great.
No, his hands aren't that great, and he doesn't have separation. He doesn't run great routes. Outside of that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the show?
Yeah. There's Doug Gottlieb. Way to go. Doug Gottlieb, Fox Sports Radio. He's not on today, actually. He's doing Speak for Yourself. All right, we're done. Doug Gottlieb, Earl Watson, Rick Barry, Joe Vardon at Cleveland.com was terrific. It just walked out a Cavs practice. Good podcast today. Check it out if you missed the